Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of A Real Point of View. I'm your host, Greg Morgan, and I'm also the movie guy, the real movie guy. And joining me is the movie maven herself, Miss Karen D. How you doing, Karen?
I'm doing good, Greg.
Good. This has been kind of a difficult week for me at my main gig, but you know what? That doesn't matter. This is what I really look forward to every week. So hopefully you people out there in TV land / stream land / YouTube land are having a good week and that you're enjoying this with us too. So why John Garfield?
Well, just because we kind of got started with our podcast and sort of looking at old movies, and I sort of wanted to circle back to that. And John Garfield just kind of came to mind because he's such a good actor, and he has a very interesting story, very interesting Hollywood story. So I just thought, it might be kind of cool to just sort of check in on somebody from the golden age of Hollywood, and see what we think of him.
So when you think about classic Hollywood, names that really, kind of belt out there would be names like, I don't know, James Cagney or Joseph Cotton even. What's so appealing and interesting about John Garfield? Because this is basically that era where it's kind of like a film noir, for example. A lot of films that Garfield was affiliated or associated with in his short career. Why is he a big name for you?
Well, because I just think he was a consummate actor. I've seen a number of movies with him, and I don't ever recall a bad or less than intense performance, less than like he's all in on whatever he's being asked to do, no matter how big or small of a part. And he just struck me as a powerhouse. He just brought a lot of intensity and just a lot of just life force to the roles that he was asked to play. So that to me just makes him really interesting. He was a pioneer in that he was the predecessor for the method of acting, for the method school of acting. He was sort of a predecessor to that. And he's also been referred to as the Jewish Brando. He studied with, I can't remember the names of the people that he studied with. There was a great Russian drama teacher that he studied with. And I want to say it's, her name was Maria. And I can't remember exactly how to pronounce the name. And I don't have my glasses either. I can't find her name. But anyway, he studied with great Russian. He studied with a woman who was like considered one of the consummate drama teachers. And, and he taught her, she taught him a lot. He also, I guess what's also interesting is that he's one of those people who just had a very tough life before getting into acting. He was in gangs. He suffered a lot of tragedy in his life because he grew up very poor. His father was like a presser, like a clothes presser. But then he also worked as a cantor in the church, and cantor is like a singer,
Right.
like a scriptural, like a scripture type singer.
Correct.
So his father did that part-time. His mother died when he was only 7 years old, and he was sort of bounced around between, relatives' homes, and that's how he got into gangs. I mean, I'm sure he found it difficult to figure out, whether people truly cared for him or not. His father did remarry, and he still got into a lot of trouble, but somehow he fell into the hands of, and I'm sorry, the teacher who helped him so much is Maria Uspenskaya. She had a drama school, and she saw something in him, and he sort of got steered into acting, and I would say it probably saved his life, temporarily anyway, and he's even quoted as saying if he had not been an actor, he could have easily ended up being enemy number one, like public enemy number one, because he was like this bad boy kind of thing. But he got steered into acting, and it's like he had all this pent up energy that he could pour into these roles. And to me, his roles never lacked for energy. He never gave a boring performance. I mean, even in Repose, he just seemed to be electric to me. So, so that's why. And also, like I said, he's just had a very interesting life. When he sort of got interested in acting, he made friends with Clifford Odets, who is a great American playwright. Mm-hmm. And Clifford Odets wrote Golden Boy with him in mind. But when it came time for the play to be cast, John Garfield did not get the lead role. Instead, it went to somebody else because it was determined by whoever was banking the play, that John Garfield wasn't ready yet for that. And that sort of ticked him off, understandably so. In the meantime, he sort of started getting some notice from Hollywood because he was working on Broadway and doing really well, getting very good reviews. But at that point in time, in those days, I mean, he was born in 1913 and he died in 1952. So, 30s, in the 30s or so, when he was like early 20s or so, working in Hollywood was sort of like for has-beens or hacks, not for actual actors, not for the true actors. And so he really, I mean, he was offered screen test several times by Warner Brothers and Paramount, and he turned them down because he wanted to be in the real theater, which was on Broadway. When he finally did assent or consent to go to Hollywood, he made sure that in his contract there was a clause that said that he could do legitimate theater, at least one legitimate theater play. And he considered that really acting. And the film stuff was sort of like just what he did to make a living. But what he really cared about was the theater. So, so that was interesting. He also just was like a real bad boy with regard to the studio system. He was suspended 11 times by Warner Brothers because he wouldn't play by their rules. And he finally said, screw it, I'm not signing. When his contract with Warner Brothers was up, and remember, the studio system was very much in full force. When his contract was up, he was like, screw that, I'm starting my own independent film company. He was one of the first actors to do that, if you don't count Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Mary Pickford, who started United Artists. beyond, other than them, he was one of the first actors to say, I'm going to start my own production company. I'm going to, figure out what kind of material is going to work for me and, greenlight my own projects. So that was really interesting. And he also just did some really interesting movies, I think.
Okay, that sounds legitimate. Yeah, I read different articles on him, and he was kind of known as the blue collar actor, more down to earth type roles. And well, with that being said, what were your favorite movies of his that really brought out that essence of the star quality that obviously he had?
Well, there are two movies I have in mind. My all-time favorite movie of his is The Postman Always Rings Twice with Lana Turner. I just thought he just leapt off the screen. And I remember the first time, I mean, this movie was made, I believe, I want to say it was made in like 1946, somewhere in there. Well before I ever showed up on Earth. And I remember seeing this movie as a child and as a teenager, and just, oh my God, just having like the hugest crush on John Garfield. It's like, sign me up. Where is he? He is
Heaven,
awesome.
I guess, by then. By the time you saw it, heaven, probably.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, he died prematurely at a very early age. He didn't even make it to 40.
Yeah, 39 years old. Yeah.
Yep. But I just thought, oh my God, he was so, I mean, in 1946, being overtly sexual was just completely really unheard of. The typical, I mean, a lot of leading men were like, I mean, you had like the occasional exception, like Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind. But even he didn't come across with sort of like the animal sexuality, to me, that John Garfield did. Like with Clark Gable, I always felt like there was just like a tiny little bit kind of held back. Like there was a point up to which he would go, but not go any further. With John Garfield, it was like the covers came off and you didn't know where he was going to go. And literally anything was possible. And that where, like in Gone with the Wind, Clark Gable was very much the gentleman, but he was also, he also was like like a man's man.
Yeah, very virile.
Right. But also the gentleman. So you knew that he wouldn't be impolite. He wouldn't, breach protocol. Not with John Garfield. John Garfield was like, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you think you are. If I want you, I'm going to get you, and he just wasn't afraid to show, I think even more than Clark Gable, he wasn't afraid to show just lust, I guess. That's what I'm talking about. He wasn't afraid to show lust. And so it was explosive to me on the screen. Seeing him in The Postman Always Rings Twice, I was really wishing I was Lana Turner. So that's like my favorite picture. I mean, he just really steals that whole movie from Lana Turner, and he just steals the whole show. What about you? What's your favorite movie with John Garfield?
Okay, here's the problem with me. Just like anything else, you find that there are a core set of actors and actresses that you follow and or are a fan of, obviously. And I can tell you're definitely a fan of John Garfield. But one of my favorite movies is a movie where John Garfield is actually a supporting actor, not the main actor, because the main actor is Gregory Peck.
What a surprise.
So one of my favorite movies is Gentleman's Agreement. But not just because of this Gregory Peck, because of the essence of the film. Sadly, we live in very turbulent times, seemingly for centuries, when it comes to racism and bigotry and things of that nature. And of one of the early movies where bigotry is really very prevalent is in this film, where we have a reporter who is pretending to be Jewish. And we know John Garfield as being Jewish. In this film, he is a good friend of this reporter, and John Garfield is Jewish. And it shows all the horrible things and terrible things and how you're being treated. And John Garfield was no exception. His character in this film is being treated horrifically. After coming back from the war, you fight for your country, you do all you can, and then they don't accept it and don't accept you, on and on and on. So that was one of the reasons why I actually like this film, because he's Jewish. He's playing this Jewish character in this film, who is a friend of a guy who's pretending to be Jewish to do an expose. And then the guy who's doing the expose realizes and understands that not only is it's his bigotry, but his chauvinistic attitudes. All these things come to light for him, and it puts him in a different perspective. So, yeah, but if it wasn't for his friend, John Garfield's character in this film, it helps him open his eyes. It helps him see firsthand. It helps him realize that this guy who he accepted readily wasn't accepted hardly by anyone. And pretty good movie. And again, that down-to-earth true expressions of this guy. And for a tough guy, he was kind of emotional, you know? So that's that nice blend of character and realism, truism, and that's how you felt when you see this film. So yeah, he was a supporting actor, but he was a good supporting actor. And you are still living somewhat through the eyes of this guy and the things that are happening to him. And that people don't realize. And it's just the bigotry of others. No matter what it is, no matter who it is, no matter what genre, no matter what ethnicity, bigotry is a horrible thing, no matter what it is, no matter who it is. It preys upon. And this movie is one of those early films that show that, at least for me. So that's one of my favorite films. I so you had another film. What was your other film?
Well, my other film is Humoresque with Joan Crawford, and in this movie he plays a somewhat different character, but probably one of the things that he probably disliked, especially about the films, about the Hollywood system, the contract system, was that he didn't think he was given enough variety of roles to play. So he's always like, the up and coming, scrappy, younger kid, younger guy, younger man who, just he doesn't come in like the matinee idol. It's not like he plays some rich guy who isn't worried about where his next meal is coming from. There's always some struggle. It's like it's always like some working class guy.
Yeah, like the blue collar guy.
Right, the blue collar guy, and that was it. So Humoresque was like a little bit of a departure, in that he was playing a working class guy, all right, like this, but he was a very talented violinist. And so he's struggling to become noticed and to get a job playing, with an orchestra, with the symphony orchestra. And through a series of fortunate or unfortunate coincidences, he meets up with Joan Crawford, who is married and wealthy and becomes a benefactor for him. And she helps him achieve the career that he wants. So he gets these engagements to play the violin, all over the country, and at the highest levels of society or whatever. And they fall in love, I guess. But she has a whole set of other problems. For one, she's an alcoholic, and the other problem is that she's already married. So and John Garfield's character also, there's like another young woman who's sort of hovering around on the sidelines, and he's sort of thinking, well, I could be with her. She was definitely in love with him, but he didn't really notice her enough because he was like completely distracted by Joan Crawford. And Joan Crawford's character held the keys to the kingdom as far as his career, which he so desperately wanted, was concerned. So it's really interesting to see, like, this particular character, okay, blue collar guy, but blue collar guy in high collar, high tea society, and is he a fish out of water? Well, of course he is. He's completely a fish out of water. And
Kind of the epitome of diamond in the rough.
right. And there isn't any way that he's ever going to be comfortable in these particular waters, because he just doesn't have enough breeding. He doesn't have enough education. He doesn't have enough, of the charm school sort of finishing of the rough edges that it would take for him to move comfortably in that society. So that's part of the struggle too. So that's what I like, and I sort of like the idea of him playing, a concert violinist. It's really interesting. And I guess the other thing I would point out is that there's a distinction with The Postman Always Rings Twice, because he was also fish out of water with The Postman Always Rings Twice too. But it wasn't so much about class. I mean, there's a little bit of classism there in that he was kind of like this, drifter who did odd jobs. And he shows up at Lana Turner and her husband's house, and they're sort of middle class, but it's not like they're in high society at all. They're just, they're kind of lower middle class. I mean, I think they run a diner, and she works in the diner, and he, the husband owns the diner and works around the house. And John Garfield's character kind of just needs some offers to do handiwork to just kind of make it from, day to day, and they hire him. But Lana Turner's bored with her husband. He's a lot older than her, and basically all he does is boss her around, and all she does is work, and she wants to have fun. I mean, she's young, and she wants to go out and do things, and her husband's old and tired and boring. And here comes John Garfield, who's like, yeah, I'm looking for some excitement. You and me could really, trip the light fantastic. It'll just be awesome. And Lana Turner's like, sign me up. Yeah. Because my hubby can barely make it up the stairs. And by the time we get done with him, he won't even be anywhere near any stairs. He'll be, pushing up daisies. So let's work that out, because we need to be happy. And, and so it's really interesting to see them plot, and to just see, there are times when she can't stand him, and, and other times when it's like he just breaks through her defenses, and it's just really, wow. It's like, wow, very sensual to see. And it has nothing to do with clothes on or off, because the clothes don't really come off. I mean, it was 1946, for crying out loud. It's just, but the idea of somebody just sort of breaking through and saying, I really, really want you. I so want you, and it's like, oh, yeah, wow, okay, you got me. Um, so that was really interesting, but in both instances, fish out of water, you know.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
But those are two of my favorite films. Although I really like Gentleman's Agreement too, because in that instance he is somewhat of a different character in that he's not the romantic lead. He's the friend. But because he's the friend who, like you said, is experiencing the bigotry that Gregory Peck's character is trying to,
Expose.
document
Mm-hmm.
through, by pretending to be Jewish. But he has a Jewish friend who's actually going through, he can't, there are covenants that were in place that kept him from moving to the neighborhood that he wanted to move to. Gregory Peck's girlfriend was, was all, nice and polite on the outside, but inside she held a deep-seated hatred of Jewish. She was very much anti-Semitic. And everyone in their circle was too, as it turns out. I mean, and Gregory Peck's character really had to fight to get the chance to do this story. So to do the story about, whether there was anti-Semitism or not, and how does it manifest.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, it was really cool that John Garfield sort of took this second banana character. But he was definitely, memorable, even within the very limited stricture, confines of that character, because they did not give him a whole lot to do.
Yeah. Well, my other movie, maybe not so popular, a movie, but probably something that I would gravitate toward because I'm really into whodunits and thrillers and having to do with murder and suspicion and all that good stuff. So my second movie was They Made Me a Criminal, which came out in 1939, and it's funny. I guess in film, especially back then, there was kind of this counter support, and yet at the same time, let me rephrase that. Hollywood dealt with boxing and fighters in many different ways. In this particular film, one of the ways that Hollywood would deal with the fight game is that the fighter is not a very intelligent person because he has to fight to make a living. In itself is kind of brutal, and how could you be smart when you're getting your brains beaten? And then Hollywood, on the other hand, would have a very smart individual who boxing was just like a tool, a means to an end, something they like to do, i.e., like in Gentleman Jim with Errol Flynn, for example. So treating the boxer with a lot more respect. Well, in this particular film, the boxer is basically a tool, early on especially in the film, because there is a murder that occurs, and he is led to believe that he is the cause of the murder. And so this happened when he was in a drunken stupor, and so his so-called friends got him out of there and took him home, and realized that he is so out of it that they decided to take advantage of him. They start stealing his money, stealing his jewels, we'll say his watch and all this stuff. And then they decide, well, we're going to get out of here. We're just going to get away. And yet people find out that, hey, this person who was accosted is now dead, and the people who were around him was the boxer, his friend, and his quote-unquote girlfriend. The quote-unquote girlfriend gave up on him real quick, ran away with the so-called friend, and now they're running from the police, and they get this horrible crash where everybody thinks that the main character, the boxer, is dead because they find his jewels and his watch and all these things on the dead person in the car, but the car would kind of expose for the most part, so a lot of the body was dismembered. You couldn't tell who the person was, except it was a male and a female, and it was wearing his clothes. So he goes to his lawyer to try to figure out what am I supposed to do? I'm reading the newspaper, and all of a sudden I know somebody's dead. He said, but I didn't kill anybody, but everybody thinks he did. So this movie is him trying to figure out what he's going to do. But what I thought was really interesting was early in the film, he is so taken advantage of. It's horrible. It's horrible. Even the lawyer, he said, hey, I got money that's in the bank. Can you get it out for me? It's like, I think it was like $5 or $10 million, or not, well, $10,000, something like that, because you got to understand this is the 30s, and so that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars now. And so he's like, can you get that for me? He goes, oh, the lawyer's like, sure, I'll get it for you. And then he gets the money. He's telling me, he said, but you're going to have to lay low, not letting people see you, this, that, and the other. When Garfield's character comes back to get the money, he gives him $250. He's like, where's my money? He said, well, part of that money was payment to me for getting the money. He's like, $10,000?
Yeah. Wow.
He's like, yeah. He's like, look, buddy, he's going to fire you. So, see, that's what got you in trouble. See, you do this, I can do this and do that. And you need to lay low, and you don't want to do that. You want any people to know that you're doing it. So, yeah, it's $250. You're going to take the $250. You can't get it in the car. You can't get it in a cab. People will see you. So you're going to have to ride the rails. And that way, no one will see you. You can get places. Heck, $250, that'll last you for 6 months. And the sad part was, he was gullible. He took that advice. That was horrible advice.
Of course, the attorney should have been disbarred, but I digress.
Well, the attorney was actually a shyster, obviously. So. But all this to say, here's this guy, he's trying to figure it out. And he's so gullible, and he has so many things happen to him that at some point he finds himself cross country and faints somewhere in Arizona, which of course I don't even know how he got there. He got chased off the rail by the rail men. He fell off a train. I mean, it's just a horrible thing. So I thought it was just this horrific essence of errors, horrific essence of how people are being treated, horrific essence about this guy who actually seems like he's a kind of a good guy, just wayward, and how people take advantage of him. And because of what the lawyer said, he wasn't able to be himself. And that was sad in this film early on. But one of the things we were talking about blue collar earlier, what was cool when I was watching this movie, I used to watch a lot of films of that era, in the late 20s, 30s, 40s. And one of the games that ends up in a lot of these movies are the Bowery Boys. And they too make an appearance in this film. And it's just so funny how they come to be in this film. So, not to give the total film away, because I think that's what I'm doing. So, but I actually like Garfield under there because he was vulnerable. And in other movies I had seen, he was a tough guy.
Right.
So he was kind of a tough guy in a way, but so vulnerable that he couldn't be himself. And that's interesting. That takes a lot of acting chops to try to be a passive aggressive when you want to be assertive aggressive. So, so I kind of like that one. Quirky.
Yeah. And fortunately, life wasn't kind to John Garfield. He was politically active. He was personally interested in civil rights causes. He was personally interested in trying to eviscerate the scourge of anti-Semitism and bigotry. And so he put his personal, views on the line to do that. And he got caught up in the Red Scare. And I think he's like one of the people, when you read the history of Hollywood and just the impact that the Red Scare had on Hollywood in the 40s, into the 50s, especially the House Un-American Activities Committee. There are people for whom I would say the House Un-American Activities Committee was responsible for their death because of the amount of stress that they caused in their lives, and just the fear and the terror. It was actually terror that this committee caused through, completely inappropriate, questionings of people's political beliefs or their actions, whether they were members of the Communist Party or not. And John Garfield was caught up in all that. And he was, and generally it was like this, so the liberals, the people who were politically active and of a liberal persuasion, or sympathetic to liberal causes like racial justice or, religious freedom or whatever, were more likely to be targeted by the House Un-American Activities Committee than, the typical conservative Republican people. And, John Garfield, when he was brought before the House Un-American Activities Committee, denied being a communist, and he actually was not a communist. He was never a member of the Communist Party. He had a girlfriend who was a member of the Communist Party, or not his girlfriend, but his wife. At one point, she sort of flirted or was a member of the Communist Party, but he never was. Not that should have mattered, because being a member of the Communist Party wasn't a crime then, just like it's not now. It was never a crime.
Right.
And he was asked to, name names of other people that were supposedly, communist, and he refused to do that. And so in between 1949 and 50, his career essentially fell off of a cliff because no one would hire him. He probably didn't have money to create his own projects, and even if he had, no one would have distributed them. And he was a third rail, just like, so many other people, writers, other actors, directors became third rail. So no one wanted to be in the same room with them because they were afraid of catching communism. And he'd had heart issues anyway. And I think the stress of that situation just exacerbated his heart issues. And he did some foolish things to sort of push the envelope physically. He wouldn't sleep, but I think, he, would run himself ragged and stuff like that. But I think that was a reaction to the stress of being in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee, and also not just that, but the consequence of having your career just shredded along with your reputation, just completely eviscerated. And he ended up, dying in a friend's apartment, in his sleep at the age of 39.
Yeah.
Ironically, after he died, it became publicized that he was not a member of the Communist Party. And when his funeral happened, it was absolutely mobbed by people. And what was reported was that nothing like that had been seen since Rudolph Valentino had died and his funeral had occurred. So, interesting.
It is a sad situation, obviously.
It is sad because of that misguided, zeal that was completely unconstitutional, which we now know in retrospect, it literally ruined lives. You know, it literally caused people to die. It literally, we lost so much from a creative standpoint because we were trying to, we as a country, I mean, were afraid of communism,
Right.
you know, and that fear cost us in ways that I don't think we'll ever be able to, you know, we won't be able to recover what was lost. It's just gone.
Yeah. So, as coming to an end of our program, John Garfield, what do we say about this actor? Fine actor, misunderstood, obviously. Hard life, but able to, fortunately for us as fans and viewers, able to put that aside long enough to be able to give us some wonderful performances. Any other movies that you thought that our viewers might want to see?
Yeah, they're quite a few. Besides They Made Me a Criminal, one of his best known movies is Body and Soul, where he plays a boxer. And he actually was a boxer in real life. I mean, he spent a lot of time learning how to box. I believe he was nominated for an Academy Award for the movie Four Daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And that was made in 1938. That's definitely worth seeing. Dust Be My Destiny in 1939.
Wasn't he in the Marines?
Wasn't he in what?
The Marines, I think that's.
No, that I don't know. I love that he was in The Sea Wolf with Edward G. Robinson because he's another one of my favorite actors. And I love a seafaring picture. I love a pirate picture.
Seafaring picture.
So, Destination Tokyo would be another really good picture.
Yeah, that actually was pretty good. I forgot about that one.
And Body and Soul actually came out in 1947 after Gentleman's Agreement, Humoresque, and The Postman Always Rings Twice. 1946 was just an amazing year for John Garfield because he made those movies in that time. Between 1945 and 47, I would say that was like he was peak. He was at his peak in terms of his career.
So I apologize. It wasn't it was the Air Force, not the Marines.
Oh, okay.
So I knew it was a military movie like that.
Yeah, so I would check movies out like that. I mean, Body and Soul is just a total classic, and Gentleman's Agreement is excellent. It's just well done, and all the performances in that are excellent. Not just John Garfield, but Gregory Peck and oh God, who else was in this movie? Dorothy McGuire, of course.
Right, yeah.
Dorothy McGuire and Celeste Holm. I mean, they were all just amazing in that particular movie.
There is one. It's called Pride of the Marines. I know something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is based off a true story. So, I always like those biopics. So, yeah, John Garfield, good actor, real life tough guy. Kind of a predecessor to some other tough guys. You mentioned Marlon Brando's one, kind of that pre-James Dean. So yeah, New York born and raised.
Yeah, he was really an excellent actor, and just I think he had a big heart, but I think the country broke his heart.
And that's sad. That's sad because you think you've arrived and then you really haven't.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging out with us and spending this hour on A Real Point of View with me and Karen and I, us, all that good stuff. We hope that you join us again here on A Real Point of View. Check out our YouTube channel for any of the previous episodes that we've had, and also too we have some archived for episodes also on Blog Talk Radio. So everything under A Real Point of View. So you can see some of the earlier and listen to some of the earlier shows that we've had, and the different people that have been on the show with us, providing and giving their insight on film and different genres of film. So thanks again for joining us. Have a wonderful night and enjoy your weekend, and check out A Real Point of View. Take care, everybody. See you at the movies.
Good night.